Alright, so as for crimping the blanks, I bought a blank crimp die, and this crimp die is from CH Tool and Die. Let me see, make sure that you can see this. I'm going into the reloading press. There we go, get that flipped around there. This is a 6-star blank crimp die. It's for 30 caliber. This is the one off CH Tool and Die's website. I already have it dialed in to put the correct amount of crimp on our blanks, I think. You do have to adjust it in this process. You actually have to use this die twice because of the die that I use in between. It opens the crimps back up. So then we have to recrimp it and set it at a new depth. So it's, the first 5 or so rounds are usually always me trying to get it, dialed in correctly. So we put our, blank formed case. It has yet to put the crimp on with the powder, primer, the whole gig. And we're ready to set our first crimp. And so I like to push it down a little bit and then come back up. I did not do the full stroke of the press, and it's not quite close, so we'll do it again. I just want to make sure that I don't over crimp and balloon the crimp tip, because then it's hard to recover from that. And you have to reform it, and it stretches it, and it makes it look weird, and I'd just rather be safe and kind of do it just a little bit at a time here. So there we go. There's our new 6-sided crimp blank. Now if you were using this in a bolt gun, this would probably be an acceptable round to just go ahead and put into a bolt gun and work. It'll function fine, it'll feed fine, but for the semi-automatic I like to add a little bit of a step and elongate the round just a little bit with a separate die that I'm going to use next, and that way it helps feed better into the gun. So we'll keep moving. I think this die can be adjusted just a little bit out until that's pretty much at the full stroke. There we are, we're pretty much at the full stroke. Set our die in that. Looking good. Now you can see that's not quite closed, but that's not going to matter because we have to do it twice, remember, because we have to set that other step into the neck. And it's just a little bit off. That'll be just perfect. That one didn't go close nearly enough, so we'll screw our die in a little bit more and kind of test it there. There. That looks a little bit better. You can see it's still just a little bit open. Not a big deal, because when we go to put our next step in, it'll open them back up, and I'll show you that in just a second. Alright, and then that's what they'll look like. Alright, now moving on to our next die. Now for this, it took me a lot of trial and error and buying random dies trying to figure this out, but being in an 8mm Mauser, I want to actually step this up to a 6mm diameter projectile with a 7mm neck. And I know that's probably confusing, but being undersized by 1mm on the tip of a blank in a semi-automatic weapon, in my opinion, does help it feed better. The sizing in the gun and making sure that it has contact and good head spacing, so to speak, is really all done off the shoulder since there's no projectile. Head spacing actually is the where the bullet sits into the crown and that measurement and how far it sits into the chamber. But we're doing everything off the shoulder, and that may be confusing for some. If you are do reload, you probably understand what that means. But the next step we want to do is kind of put an elongated bullet tip on these. So I'm using a 6mm BR Remington neck die to squeeze the tips of these down. And for these, you don't need to do a whole stroke. Now this is trial and error, but you kind of just give it a little, punch, and you can see what that's done to our casing here. And you can see how much it's opened it up, and that's why we have to use that crimp die again to close these tips. But that gives it a nice, slim, sleek bullet tip to go over. Like in the G43, there's this little it's almost heart-shaped feed ramp for the double stack mag, and it has a point in the middle of it, and these little tips can get caught right on that point, and they don't feed, and it's very frustrating. So these actually feed great in my G43. So we'll go over here and we'll do all these. All you need is just a little punch, and it puts just a little bit of that tip. You do not want to do the full stroke, or it'll totally deform your brass and it'll look really strange. And we want these to function. There we go. So this is what we've ended up with. I might be able to go a little bit more there. There we go. So this is what we've ended up with. Like I said, you can see how the crimps are open. Set those in the tray, and then I'm going to get back out my CH tool and die crimping die. And this is again for 30 caliber, so it'll do lots of different rounds. And then once again, you're just going to kiss it, and you can feel it. Whenever you feel resistance on the neck, you just want to give it a little pop, little close, and then that way it closes that up fairly good and tight. What you don't want to have happen is ballooning, and I'm going to try to get as close as I can to show you without going over here so it starts to balloon, but you can see it will start to deform the head of this and make it look like a little, you know, lollipop on the end, in which case the blank will be ruined and you kind of have to throw it away. And then if there's any little tiny hole left in the tip, you can take nail polish and cover those up, and that'll keep all that powder in. The powder's pretty, you know, granular. It's not real granular, rather. It's kind of flaky, and it doesn't want to come out that tip anyway. But with the Alliant bullseye powder, it's really small grains, and it will leak out when you put them in a bag or in your ammo can or what have you, your ammo pouches. This might need to be adjusted just a little bit, and just kiss it there. And you can see this one kind of started to balloon a little bit. That's where you want to stop, and then they will function perfectly. There we go. Here's how you make an 8mm semi-automatic blank for a G43.